Welcome to the Wired for Success podcast, your show for ambitious, mission-driven entrepreneurs who want to build million-dollar businesses without sacrificing their health, relationships, or happiness, who understand that in order to build their empire, they need a solid foundation, and that the more they are thriving, the more their business is thriving too. This show brings you the very best from science, self-development, and entrepreneurship to set you up for sustainable success. Hi, I'm Claudia Garbutt, the scientist turned mindset and high performance coach for entrepreneurs, and I help you get wired for success. Hey everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Wired for Success podcast, where we talk about all things science, self-development, and entrepreneurship that help you get to that next level of success in your life and business. And we're back with another exciting interview episode today. I really love speaking with all those amazing people from so many different backgrounds. It just never gets boring. And I hope that you listeners out there are having just as much fun listening to these episodes as I have recording them. Anyway, so my guest today is entrepreneur, author, and speaker Grant Baldwin, who teaches speakers how to find and book paid speaking engagements. Grant is the founder of the Speaker Lab and author of The Successful Speaker. He has earned over $2 million from 500 plus paid engagements all over the world, and he has done pretty much everything from closed-door workshops to keynotes in front of 13,000 people. Not bad, right? So I'm looking forward to learning his best tips for paid public speaking today. Welcome, Grant, and thank you so much for being on my show today.
Thanks, Claudia. I appreciate you letting me be here.
Of course. I'm looking forward to it. So public speaking traditionally ranks really high on the worst fears lists, right? It's something that really divides people. They either love it or hate it. And there seem to be very few people who don't have a strong opinion about it and are indifferent about the topic. You obviously fall into the first category, but has this always been the case? Or have you always enjoyed public speaking?
Yeah, I think even growing up, public speaking was something that I would get a little bit nervous about. And still, even to this day, I think that's kind of a misconception about speaking is that people assume that speakers just don't get nervous. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. But so I still got, the nerves and butterflies when I was speaking in, like a high school public speaking class or something like that, or a college class. But I also knew I really enjoyed it. And it's something I kind of looked forward to. And I felt like I was decent at and wanted to do more of. And so even in college, I worked for a guy who was a full-time speaker. And so I kind of got to help him a little bit behind the scenes and help him with some of the booking and travel and logistics and that sort of thing. And just kind of got to see a little bit behind the curtain. And I was like, I think I would enjoy that. I think I could be decent at that. So yeah, I think it's also kind of a misconception that people are either born speakers or they're not. And there's certainly there's going to be people that are more charismatic than others, who have more of a bigger personality than others, that may seem like it lends itself well to stage. But the reality is there's no cookie cutter way that a speaker has to look or sound or be. You have speakers that are, huge personalities and larger than life. Then you have some that are very quiet and soft spoken, and both are effective, both work, and both are going to resonate with different types of audiences. So yeah, if you have any desire to speak whatsoever, then that's absolutely something that we want to be able to help you accomplish.
Sounds great. Now, what was the turning point in your life that really made you decide to turn public speaking into a career?
Yeah, I think a big part of it was probably when my wife was pregnant with our first child. So my wife and I, we were high school sweethearts. We dated for several years and got married, have 3 beautiful girls now. And so when she was pregnant with our first child, who will be 16 in just literally a couple of days. So we got a whole new adventure coming our way with driving and licenses and all that. But when she was pregnant with our daughter, there's nothing like bringing a kid into the world that just causes you to question everything. What am I doing with my life? And so at the time, I was actually working as a youth pastor at a local church, and it gave me a lot of opportunities to speak. And so it kind of got me just thinking, what is it that I really want to do? Is it this? Is it something else? And the thing I really kept coming back to is speaking. Speaking was one of those things, again, I felt like I was decent at, I wanted to do more of, but I just had no idea, can you actually make a profession out of this? Can you make a living out of this? Can you start a business doing this? And so at the time, there wasn't a lot of resources available in terms of books or podcasts or anything to just learn how do you find and book gigs. And so I started just emailing and stalking and harassing other speakers, just peppering them with questions, just like, hey, just tell me what to do. And I felt like if someone would just tell me what to do, I felt like I could execute it. And so one thing we talk with our students a lot about today is, at the time, I felt like I had the potential, but I needed the plan. I had the potential, but I needed the plan. And that's the case with so many speakers that we work with who feel like they have the potential. I've done some speaking. I feel like I'm decent at speaking. I want to do more of it. I just don't know what to do now. Someone just tell me, like, how do you find gigs and how much do you charge and who hires speakers and what do you speak about and how does this mysterious world work? And so that's kind of where I was at. And so, yeah, it was definitely my wife being pregnant with our first child that really caused me to say, hey, if I'm going to do this, if I've always had a desire or passion to be a speaker, and I think it's something I could pursue, at some point we have to do it. Let's give it a shot. And I don't want to, I don't want to live with regret, wondering, I think I could have made that work, but I'll never know because I didn't try. So speaking was definitely that for me.
Right. I'm looking forward to dig deeper into all those questions you just mentioned. But before we do, a lot of people are so uncomfortable with public speaking because they listen to all those worst case scenarios in their head that are usually far worse than any real life experiences. So just to put those fears into perspective, what has been your worst experience as a speaker so far?
Yeah, I've had plenty of bad ones, and I think it's also again kind of a misconception that people assume that as a speaker, like the audience is against you, and that's not the case at all. Like every single one of us listening right now, we've all sat in audiences before, and we don't want the speaker to fail. Like we want them to be good because I don't want to sit and listen to a boring speaker. Like I want them to be good. I want to be engaged. I want to be entertained. I want to learn something, and so the audience is on your side. They want you to do well. But for me, I've had a couple times. There was a time, multiple times where I've had the like a fire alarm go off, and it just causes complete chaos in the room. I had a time where I was speaking in like this metal building, and there was a hailstorm, all this ice just pounding, and it's just crazy loud. Felt like the whole place is going to collapse at any moment. There's a time I was speaking in Texas, and there was a hurricane on its way, and so and it was supposed to like hit land in the next few hours, and somehow we still had this session, and nobody's paying attention. Everybody's thinking about how do we get out of town. I'm on stage thinking about how do I get out of town. There's a time where I was speaking, and a dog came running into the room, and it was just zipping around the room. Several hundred people in the room, and the dog comes running around, and everybody's lost. Nobody's paying attention, right? So there's certainly those times where like something happened, and it was a crazy experience, and it was just kind of this bizarre situation. But also like that's part of it. Not every time you speak is going to be perfect. And sometimes there's going to be things that are outside of your control, but also recognizing for you as a speaker, like what are the things that you can control? How do you make sure that you are prepared, that you show up prepared, that you have the best possible content that you can have? Because another thing that we tell speakers all the time is that your best marketing is a great talk. So let me give an example. My family and I, we live here in Nashville, Tennessee, here in the US, and we love burritos. I don't know if you're a burrito fan, but we're big fans of burritos. And so there's a place that we go to called Baja Burrito, and they have some of the best burritos that you will ever find. And so we love going to Baja Burrito, and the restaurant, if you can even call it that, it's just this hole in the wall place. The furniture is kind of, the tables and chairs are kind of a mess. Like it's always got a line out the door. You always got to wait a long time. There's nothing special about the place itself, but the burritos are absolutely amazing. And that's the thing that we keep going back for. And so you want to make sure as a speaker, there's going to be some things that are outside of your control, but making sure that the product is the absolute best that it can possibly be, because your best marketing is a great talk. So you think about restaurants or music or movies or things that you had some type of encounter or experience with, that then you go on to tell other people about. Oh, you got to watch this show, or you got to watch this documentary, or you got to listen to this music, or you got to check out this movie, or you got to go to this hotel, you got to experience this restaurant. And we do that because we had such a great experience. And so that's why it's so important to make sure that even though there's things that may happen outside of your control, there may be times that you bomb and you fall apart on stage, but make sure that you do the best possible job to create, so to speak, the best possible burrito that you can for your audience.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think that really highlights the fact that we all know we should focus on the things that we can control and let go of the things that we can't control, because we can't control the weather, the hail, the hurricane, but we can prepare for the event and do, as you said, do our best to deliver a great talk. And I think it's really important to talk about the fact that things don't always go smoothly, but that this is also usually not the end of the world. So, what did you learn from those experiences? Has it changed how you show up as a speaker?
Yeah, I think that, again, it's important to recognize that there are, again, some things that are in your control, some things that are out of your control. And so whenever I finish a speech, it's good to kind of run through a filter of a couple different things of what went well, what didn't. And you can do this in a couple different ways. One is you yourself as a speaker. Did you show up prepared? Did you give your best? Did you make sure you had enough rest, that you were hydrated, that you were ready to go, that you were focused and locked in? Or did you kind of like go through the motions? Did you phone it in? Did you not really prepare that well? So that's a big thing. It's just looking at what you can control. Another factor is going to be the environment. Okay. So let me give you an example. I remember a few years ago, I was speaking at an event, and they had me do two presentations. One was a keynote in front of about 2,000 people, and in this room, it sat about 2,000 people. I feel like, sorry, I had a sneeze coming on. All right, I'm back. So we had about 2,000 people in this room for a room that sat 2,000 people. And so in that type of setting, it works really, really well. But then afterwards, they had me do a workshop in the same room with about 50 people. And so 50 people in a room that seats 2,000 people just doesn't work. It feels dead. It feels empty, right? And so it's the same room, but two totally different settings there. So the environment is definitely going to be a factor for you. Another factor in terms of how a presentation might go is going to be the audience, right? Are they tired? Are they engaged? Do they want to be there versus do they have to be there? Maybe their boss made them show up at something. Maybe it was a parent or a teacher that made them be at some type of school function. They don't want to be there. They're not really paying attention. What if, let's imagine this. Let's say you were speaking at a sales conference and you're speaking to a group of sales leaders. And right before you get up on stage, the vice president of sales for this company hops up and says, "Hey, bad news, sales have been low. And so we are going to have to lay off 30% of you. And so we're going to talk about that more after our next speaker. Please welcome to the stage, Claudia." Like, it doesn't matter what you say at that point. Like, nobody's paying attention. Like, they're totally gone, right? Yeah. So again, it's just important to realize when you're looking at, hey, how did the talk go? There are things that you can absolutely control. And then there's things about the environment or the audience that are outside of your control. Now, you also don't want to be lazy, just kind of chalk it up to, well, they were a bad audience or it was a bad environment. No. Like, again, what are the things that you can control to make sure that you are bringing your absolute best? So in that setting where, there's 2,000 seats and there's 50 people in there, it's not an ideal setting at all, but I still have a responsibility to bring my absolute best to that audience and work with what I've got in that environment and in that situation.
I like that. Yeah. And I think entrepreneurship is inherently about taking calculated risks. So before we make a decision, we want to understand the potential risks, but also the potential gains. So what has been your biggest win as a speaker so far?
Oh, good question. Biggest win. I think it kind of it can look a lot of different ways, So there were, I look back on some of my busiest years where I was doing 60, 70 events a year. That was really, really cool. Some of the biggest types of events that I've done where, like the biggest keynote that I did, I think you mentioned in the intro was 13,000. And so doing that was a really cool experience. And then being invited back to do that same event a couple of years later. And so sometimes it's those type of things. And then sometimes it's just conversations that you have with people after an event who, hey, something that you talked about really impacted me or made some type of difference and impacted my life in some way. Or you'll hear from someone, several years later that, hey, I saw you speak years ago and I still remember what you talked about. And so it's incredibly rewarding and fulfilling being a speaker. It's a lot of hard work and it's a lot of effort. And so we don't want to sugarcoat it and make it seem like it's just easy and you just close your eyes and really hard and click your heels together and then magically you can have a full-time professional speaking business. Like it doesn't work like that, but the effort that it requires and for the results that you get and for the impact that you can make is certainly incredibly rewarding.
So how did you engineer that success? Can you maybe walk us through the framework that you used that allowed you to achieve that kind of success?
Yeah, right now, even today, we use a framework that we call the Speaker Success Roadmap. It makes the acronym SPEAK. And so this is what we teach our students today. And so SPEAK. So I'll quickly walk through this, and then we can kind of dig in wherever you want. But the first part of the process is S, select a problem to solve. And so you have to be really, really clear on two things. You have to be clear on who you speak to and what is the problem that you solve. The challenge that most speakers have is we just enjoy speaking. And so we want to cast the net as far and wide as possible. And so who do we speak to? I speak to humans. I speak to people. My message is for everybody, right? But that doesn't work. And the same thing is true whenever it comes to what's the problem that you solve. A lot of times when we ask speakers, what do you speak about? They say, well, what do you want me to speak about? I can speak about anything. I'm like, well, that's not true. That's not accurate, And so when you think about like this podcast has to fit into a certain category within iTunes or Spotify. And so where is it that people are going to find it? And so if we say, well, the podcast is for everybody, well, it's really for nobody. Then so you have to be really, really clear about who you speak to and what's the problem that you solve. And again, it's counterintuitive. But the more specific, the more clear, the more focused, the more narrowed you are, the easier it is to actually find and book paid gigs. So that's the first step of the process. If you get that part right, everything else becomes a lot simpler and a lot easier. The next part of the process is P, which is prepare your talk. Prepare your talk. So being really, really clear on what's the solution that you are going to provide to the problem that you're going to be solving. The next part of the process is E, establish yourself as the expert. So 2 key marketing tools that every speaker needs. You need a website and you need a demo video. In this day and age, if you don't have a website, you don't exist and people won't take you seriously. And also you need a demo video. Now, what exactly is that? A demo video, think of it like a movie trailer. A movie is basically like you take 90 minutes, 2 hours, and you boil it down to like 3 minutes or so. And within those 2 or 3 minutes, you have an idea of who's in it, what's the plot, what's the theme. And the goal of a movie trailer and the goal of a demo video is to make you want to see more. It's for you to determine, is this a fit? Is this something I'm interested in? Would the speaker be a good fit for our event? And so having that demo video is important. The next part of the process is acquire paid speaking gigs. Acquire paid speaking gigs. Now, this is the part that a lot of times we want to jump to. We want to fast forward to. So when we talk about, well, who do you speak to? What do you speak about? Well, I don't know. I just want to speak. Like, just tell me how to book gigs. Like, okay, what's your talk about? How are you helping to solve that problem or provide that solution? I don't know. I'll come up with something. Okay, do you have a website or demo video? No, I don't need those things. Like, okay, well, it's hard to acquire paid speaking gigs if you don't have some of these foundational pieces in place first. And whenever it comes to acquiring paid speaking gigs, this is oftentimes where speakers have a difficult time because we want to go more of a passive way, whereas meaning like we have our website, we have our demo video, and now we just sit back and we wait for the phone to ring. And hopefully magically somehow people will find us. And listen, like your mom is thrilled with your website. She's going to tell both of her friends, but nobody else cares. And so you have to be proactive and have a plan in place for how are you going to consistently be able to find and book speaking gigs. And then the last part of the process, K, know when to scale. And what we mean by that is there's a lot of people who are interested in speaking, but ultimately they have a message that they want to share, and speaking is one medium to go about doing that. So people who are interested in speaking are also probably interested in writing a book or coaching or consulting or doing a podcast or doing a course or doing something else. And so we always say, like, you can do all the things, you just can't do all the things at once. So something's going to come first, something's going to come last. And what's great is you get to decide what makes sense for you. Meaning I know some speakers who they do 50, 75, 100 speaking gigs a year, and they don't do books, they don't do coaching, they don't do consulting, they don't do courses, they don't do anything else. Like, all I want to do is speak. And other people that are going, hey, I have a really successful coaching business, but I'd love to do some more speaking, maybe for lead generation or to brand building. And so I would love to do 5 gigs a year or 10 gigs a year. And I just don't know, how do I find those, and who hires me, and how does this work? And so speaking can fit into your business depending on what it is that you're trying to accomplish. But again, that's kind of the speak framework that we teach and we work with students at the Speaker Lab.
That makes a lot of sense. And I want to dig deeper into some of those things. But before we do, full disclosure, I used to be terrified of public speaking, and I couldn't understand why anyone would ever consider giving a talk when nobody was forcing them to do so. Mm-hmm. But as a coach, I try to walk the talk and practice what I preach, and that includes leaving my own comfort zone, because that's where all the growth happens. And that's why I challenged myself to do more public speaking this year. And I actually gave a TEDx-style guest talk at a high-level business mastermind yesterday, and I have my first paid speaking gig coming up at a podcasting conference.
Congrats, that's awesome.
April 2, thank you so much. That's super exciting. But of course, I'm still at the very start of my speaking career, and I don't know what I don't know. So hit me with your top 3 tips for getting started as a paid speaker. Or is it just use your framework, work with you?
Yeah. A lot of times we just go back to that framework. And I think that people are going like, yeah, but what's the secret? Like the secret is you just got to be clear on who you speak to and the problem that you solve. And that's where a lot of speakers get stuck and have a difficult time. And so let me give an example here where we always tell speakers, you want to be the steakhouse and not the buffet. Be the steakhouse, not the buffet. And what we mean by that is, let's imagine that we were looking for a bite to eat and we were looking for a good steak. We have a choice. Like we could go to a buffet where steak is one of 100 different things that they offer and they're all mediocre, or we could go to a steakhouse where they do one thing, but they do that one thing really, really, really well. They don't do lasagna, they don't do pasta, they don't do pizza, they don't do tacos. Like they do steak and that's it. And so it makes it easier to attract the right type of customer, but also repel the wrong type of customer, right? If you're a vegetarian, you're probably not showing up at the steakhouse, and that's okay. Like that's part of the point of it. And so if you're a speaker who says, well, what do you want me to speak about? I can speak about business or leadership or sales or marketing or family or marriage or parenting. It's like, maybe you know something about all those things. Maybe you're interested in all those things, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you should try to position yourself as a speaker for all of those things, because nobody can trust you. Nobody believes you, versus like, no, I do this. I solve this one specific problem for this one specific audience, and that's it. And I'm really, really good at that. Let me give you another analogy. So we were talking a little bit before we started recording about, at the time of this recording, we are hopefully coming out of the pandemic, but it's still kind of lingering and has some lingering effects. All right. So let's imagine that you got sick and you, God forbid, you had some type of brain issue. Okay. And you needed to go to a doctor, and unfortunately you had to have brain surgery. All right. So you have a choice. You could go to your local family medical doctor. They are a doctor. They went to medical school. They know more about the brain than you or I do. But if they've never done brain surgery, I don't want that person cutting my head open, right? Versus a brain surgeon who says, all I do is brain surgery. If you break your leg, I'm probably not going to be able to help you. If you've got COVID, I can't really do anything for you. If you got a bad cough, I don't know what to tell you. But if you got a brain issue, I am your person. I am the doctor that you want. I'm the surgeon that you want working on you. And so that's what we want to be as speakers, which again, it's just difficult because we have to, it forces us to narrow things down. It forces us to be focused. So, when we do that, again, it makes it easier to find and attract the right type of gig. So that's one of the bigger challenges that we try to help speakers with, is to help get that narrowed down, because there's an overlap between what you're interested in, what you're passionate about, what you're knowledgeable on, versus what is it that the organizations and groups and conferences and the market actually pays speakers for. Just because you're passionate about something doesn't mean anybody cares. Like if you say, I'm the world's greatest expert at underwater basket weaving or teaching dogs how to raise your children, like that's great, but nobody cares about that. And nobody's going to hire speakers to talk about that. And so there has to be that overlap between what what you're interested in, what you're passionate about, and what groups actually pay speakers to talk about those things. So again, once you kind of get some of that base level stuff figured out, then it's a lot easier to start building on that foundation.
That makes so much sense, to be as specific as possible to narrow down one's focus. So maybe we can run through another example. Let's say I'm willing to be in the hot seat right now. Okay. So let's say I want to speak about the importance of personal development for sustainable business growth. I'd like to speak to ambitious, mission-driven entrepreneurs, founders, business owners, and high-level CEOs. And ideally, I would like to speak at virtual events like small, high-level business masterminds or bigger virtual business conferences with maybe a focus on leadership, productivity, and high performance.
Cool.
Would that be specific enough, or is that still all over the place?
Yeah, I'll give you a couple of things that we'd kind of just walk through and kind of think through about that. There's the two initial questions that we talked about. Who do you speak to and what's the problem that you solve? A third question that's important to consider is, where do those people gather? Where do those people gather? Because part of being a speaker means that there's some type of audience. So there has to be some type of natural gathering of those people. So when we talk about, I want to speak to, high level leaders who are mission driven, who are passionate about personal development. Awesome. Like I can picture a lot of those people. But where do they gather? Like, what is that group? So if you said, I want to speak to, middle-aged women who are trying to figure out their career path and balance being a mom and being someone working in the working, okay, that's awesome. Like, Where do those people gather? Do they exist? Absolutely, right? Is there some type of natural gathering where they get together that you could actually speak at? So that's important to think through. Another good exercise is, I always think it's good to look for other speakers who are doing something similar to what you want to do. Okay. So if you said, okay, here's kind of, I have a rough idea of who I might want to speak to, what I might want to speak about. It's worth spending a few minutes on Google just to see if you can find some other speakers who are doing something similar, because what you're looking for is some people that are doing it who are a step or two ahead of you, not light years ahead of you. So if you said, I want to speak on motivation and personal development, well, who else is doing that? Well, Tony Robbins is doing that. Okay, well, if Tony's doing it, I can do it. Okay, well, we're talking about two different things there. So look for people who are a step or two ahead of you, and also doing it in a way that you want to. So Claudia, you mentioned like you want to do a lot of virtual events. Okay, so who else is doing virtual events? That's certainly a lot of opportunities that exist now, but who is doing something similar? Because it validates that there are opportunities that exist, versus just going like, okay, I want to speak on this niche subject or niche topic. I browse around, I can't find anybody doing this. This is perfect. I'm going to be the first. No. That's not what we're going for. We're looking for some validation in the marketplace that this is something that people actually hire speakers for. So what I would recommend was spend a few minutes browsing and see what you can find. A lot of times on other speaker sites, you can also find not only what they speak about, but what are some places that they have spoke to. So it's good to look up like what are previous clients that they've worked with, what are previous events that they've worked at. Again, just so you can kind of get some ideas of like what opportunities even exist out there, because it's part of the challenge, especially for newer speakers. It's like, I don't even know what the options are, Exactly. So help us kind of like narrow that down. So that can help kind of narrow things down and figure out, what some other options or opportunities are that may exist. Another good example, or another way to think about this, as a lot of people who are interested in speaking have probably done some form of speaking in the past, right? So you mentioned you're getting ready to speak at a podcasting conference. My guess is you've probably done a few other events here and there, even if it was just some free stuff. But it's a good exercise to think through like, okay, I spoke at this particular conference and I really liked it and it really went well, or they paid well, or it was a good fit, or my ideal customer or client was there. So then just kind of thinking through and doing the exercise of what other events like this exist, So if you're speaking at a podcasting conference, what other podcast conferences exist? There are other podcast conferences that exist. What other podcasting meetups? What other podcasting groups? What other podcasting, clubs or associations or anything like that you can be looking for? I found this one group that I speak to. Now let's pull on that thread and find what other groups that I could potentially speak to. Another way to think about this is just your own personal experience. And so, depending on what your background is, I'll give you an example of this. There was a guy that we were talking to, and he was a student that we worked with, and he came from the real estate world. He was a realtor, had been very, very successful as a realtor for the majority of his career. And he came to us and he really wanted to speak on something totally different. He's like, I've been in real estate a long time, but I want to speak, I don't even remember what it was now, but I want to speak on, let's just say personal development. Okay. And I want to go do that. And I'm trying to find events in other spaces that I could speak to. And I said, that's fine. We can get there. But let's start with what you are familiar with the real estate world. You are familiar with associations. And he mentioned like he had been if I remember correctly, like the president of this association, this real estate association in his state for like a couple of years. And so he knew the people, he knew the contacts, he knew the events, he knew how decisions were made, he knew speakers that they brought in. Like he just knew this world. And so I was like, let's start there. Like this is low hanging fruit. You already understand this world. You understand their lingo, you understand their challenges, you understand what they're running into, what they're looking for in speakers. Let's start there. There was another speaker we worked with who used to do a lot of consulting in the restaurant space. And so we said the same thing, like, let's start there with something you already know, you have a lot of connections with. He did a lot of speaking in restaurants and the restaurant space, the restaurant industry. And then he started to pivot and started to speak on stuff outside of the restaurant world. And now he does very little with the restaurant world, but that was a starting point because it was low hanging fruit that he understood. He already had relationships, he had contacts, he had connections there. He knew the events, he knew how they worked, he knew who the players were. Like he just knew that world. So I would ask any speaker listening right now, like, let's just look at your current experience. Like what kind of industry are you in? What connections do you have? What events are you already attending? What are the relationships that you have? And so like look in your own backyard because there's a good chance there's some low hanging fruit of things that you can already use to help you get started.
Oh, those are great tips. Thank you so much for sharing. Now, those are all the things that you have to consider, like your positioning and who you're talking to. But how much should we pay attention to our own personal goals? So if I for example, hired you and I told you, I have two goals. Number one is I want to become a TEDx speaker. And my second goal, I want to make, I don't know, let's say just 50K a year from paid speaking alone. Plus,
Mhm.
I would love to attract coaching clients from my talks. Would I approach this any differently from like from a different context? Or
Not
would it actually be
necessarily.
the same
So
thing?
let's take both of those goals. So if one of the goals is to do a TEDx speech or presentation, then you don't necessarily have to be a professional speaker to do that. There's a lot of presenters that would that give TEDx presentation. There's a lot of TEDx events all over the world, all the time. They're always looking for speakers, and so yeah, you can absolutely do that. I'd also let's take a quick side tangent here, okay, on TEDx. I think it's important to think through like what are the goals or ambitions with doing a TEDx presentation, okay? Because sometimes there's this again kind of misconception that if I do a TEDx talk, that it's going to go viral, I'm going to blow up, and this is going to be awesome. It's going to change the trajectory of my career. And 99.99% of TEDx talks go nowhere, right? They're great talks and great presentations, but you are in a sea of other TEDx talks. Now
Right.
there are the Simon Sinek's and the Brene Browns who gave a TEDx talk and it kind of really changed the trajectory of their career. But that's the exception. It's not the norm. So I would just say, like, for anyone who wants to do a TEDx talk, there's nothing wrong with it. Highly encourage it. It's a great experience, but just make sure that you have like proper expectations of what are you hoping comes from this. Because again, the high majority of TEDx presentations get a handful of views and online, and that's it. And so again, that's fine. Just make sure that you have proper expectations. As far as the other goal, in terms of I want to generate $50,000 a year from speaking, and I want to generate clients from that. Then now we've got a target of where we're headed. Let's kind of work backwards from there. And so thinking through like, okay, if one of the goals is I want to generate clients from that, then again, I'd go back to where do those people gather? Like, what is your ideal customer? What is your ideal client? And what are the events that you should be speaking at that would lead to them wanting to work with you? And so that's something that's a model that a lot of speakers that we worked with have used, where they use speaking as lead generation for another part of their business. So, for example, there's a friend of mine who runs a big marketing agency. And so he does a lot of speaking to marketing audiences and kind of talks about, hey, here's some, the latest and greatest strategies and tactics and that sort of thing. And from that, there's a lot of times audience members who would say, hey, this is awesome. Can you come help us implement this or apply this? Can we hire your company, your agency to do this? But it doesn't make sense for him if he's wanting to pick up marketing clients, if he's going to speak to parents about raising their kids, right? So you got to think through like, okay, if I want the audience to hire me for my marketing services, then what are the audiences that I need to be in front of that hire marketing consultants or marketing agencies or anything like that? So it's important to, again, kind of just reverse engineer and think through where are these people that I want to I want to speak to, and where is it that they gather? As far as the other part of it, I want to generate $50,000 from speaking. And then again, it's important to kind of like work through and figure out that alignment between who you speak to, what's the problem that you solve, and what are the opportunities that actually exist in the marketplace. Can you generate $50,000 from speaking over the course of a year? Absolutely. There's a lot of speakers that do that. It's not overly difficult. You got to actually, you got to absolutely do the work, but it is something that you can certainly do. But again, kind of reverse engineering and figuring out, what are those opportunities that are paid opportunities that may make sense. You can do 50 events for $1,000 each. You can do one event for $50,000. Now, most people would prefer the latter, but that's going to be pretty rare. That's going to be pretty difficult. And so also, again, kind of properly setting expectations that, are there speakers that get paid $50,000 a speech? Absolutely. They exist. Is that the norm? Not at all. Like most speakers are going to be, less than $5,000 a speech, but for $5,000 or $3,000, like that's pretty solid for, again, getting started and kind of building up your career. So can you accomplish those goals of doing a TEDx presentation and generating $50,000 from speaking within a year and generating clients from that? Absolutely. It's just a matter of knowing what that goal is and then working backwards from there.
Gotcha. Now, this might be a silly question, but the talk I gave yesterday was on a topic that I really enjoyed talking about. So it was about emotional mastery is the key to authentic leadership. So it is something where I can talk about physiology and psychology and leadership, personal development, all these things that I'm passionate about. Now, should I focus on crafting this one signature talk and then find those right events to pitch the talk? Or should I find the right events with the right audience and then craft a talk that's a perfect fit for that audience? It's kind of like the chicken and egg.
Totally chicken and egg situation. And so what I would tend to recommend is that you have kind of one key talk that you do, and that may modify and tweak, 5 or 10% depending on the audience. Now, again, ideally, you're speaking to very similar audiences on a regular basis. And so what you really want to avoid is creating a new talk from scratch every single time of going, okay, I spoke to this audience on X topic, and now I'm speaking to a totally different audience on a totally different topic, because then you're starting over from scratch every time. So again, a way to think about this is if you're at a restaurant, whenever you go to a restaurant, you sit down, one of the first things they do is they bring you a menu. Here are the choices of the things we can make. What you don't expect to happen is to have a server walk up and say, welcome to our restaurant. What would you like us to cook you today? And you're like, well, I'd love to see a menu. Well, we don't have menus. We can cook anything you want. Like, I'm suddenly doubtful about this place. And so you want to make sure that you've got that menu, and you need that menu to not have, pages and pages and pages of different options, but you want to have like 1, 2, 3 different talks that you offer. And that's it. So you'd rather have one amazing talk than 10 mediocre talks on 10 totally different subjects, because organizations and groups, when they hire you, they want your best. They want you to bring your absolute best. And so when you're creating a new presentation or a new talk, you are making an educated guess. I think this is funny. I think this will make sense. I think this will resonate. I think this is what people are looking for. I think, but I don't know until you get up in front of that audience. See, one of the unique things about speaking is you get real-time feedback. Like right now, we are recording a podcast, and someday in the future, there's going to be people that are listening to this all over the world. And Claudia, you and I will never actually watch them listen to this podcast. So we don't know, like you and I may be like, man, that was an amazing episode, but like, we have no clue what people will actually think of it, because we don't get to experience them experiencing it, right? Same thing with a book, same thing when someone reads a blog post. Like I've written a book, we've sold thousands and thousands of copies. I've never watched someone actually read the book. That'd probably be a little stalkerish and creepy. Whereas when you give a presentation, when you stand on stage and speak, you get that immediate real-time feedback. Are people nodding? Are they smiling? Are they writing notes? Are they paying attention? Are they checking their phone? Like, are they with me or not? And so when you get that real-time feedback, it helps you to make some adjustments to that presentation. Like, okay, that was really funny. I need to do more with that, or that didn't make any sense. I totally lost the audience there. We're going to cut that out next time. And so it's kind of like when you are at a restaurant and they're making a dish for the first time. Like, okay, we made the dish. We made a best guess. We taste it. Okay, it needs a little bit more salt, or we need to cook it a little bit longer, or we cooked it too long, or it needs a little bit, it's too sweet. We need to dial that back. And you're just making these fine-tuned adjustments to the point where when you go to a restaurant, like, I don't want the thing that they're necessarily making for the first time. Like, what's the signature dish? Like, this is a dish you've made thousands of times and it's perfect. Like, that's the thing that I want, right? So that's what audiences and groups are looking for, is the best of the best, versus like, I got 10 things that are all mediocre. What would you like me to pull out of my bag of tricks today? So that's not really what you want to try to do.
Right. So have 1 to maybe 3 signature talks and then really dial them in and deliver them.
Absolutely. Yep. Okay. Totally.
Perfect. Okay. So what are your best tips for finding those perfect events? Do you recommend any specific websites maybe where you can find paid speaking gigs, or what would be the best way to find those?
Yeah, one of the best tools that anybody can use right now is a lovely website called Google. And Google is really, really good about helping you find these. And so let's say, for example, let's go back to what we talked about earlier. You're getting ready to speak at a podcast conference, right? And it may be something that oftentimes what happens is, for most, especially newer speakers, is gigs just kind of like a random thing fell in your lap, right? So maybe you weren't necessarily hunting for it, but it just kind of fell in your lap. How did you land this podcasting gig?
I got invited.
Yeah, it's just kind of a friend of a friend, or word of mouth, or referral, something like that, which is great when those things happen. But it's hard to build a business like that. If you wanted to do 20, 30, 40 gigs a year, and you're just banking on like, I'm going to just sit and wait for someone to magically find me. Like that doesn't work. So I need to be a little bit more proactive in finding potential events that would be a good fit. So let's take the podcasting example. Like you could go online right now and search podcast conference, and you could search some other variations, podcast event, podcast association, podcast training, anything like that, to just define like what other events happen, what other events are taking place. You can start to do some digging on who are some other speakers who are speaking at those events. We touched on earlier, if you know of other speakers who are doing something similar, let's see what events that they're speaking at. Then let's go look up those events and see when those events are. Now, you also want to kind of think about like the life cycle of events. So this podcasting conference you're speaking at in the next couple of weeks or so, when did they first reach out to you, or when did you first talk to them?
Beginning of the year.
Okay. So 3-4 months in advance, right?
Yeah.
Which is fairly common. Like you think about just planning an event. And so if you find an event like, oh, this is the perfect conference, it's happening next week, all the details, speakers, all of that is planned for. That's already locked and loaded, right? So oftentimes when events are planning for speakers, they're reviewing and looking at speakers and hiring speakers, usually 3 to 6 months out. Now, the bigger the event, the further out it's going to be. Sometimes it's going to be further 9, 12 months out. In this COVID pandemic land, it's usually a shorter window because we have no idea what 3 months, 6 months, 9, 12 months is going to look like from now. And so sometimes it's a shorter window there. But the point being, if you find the perfect event and it's happening, next Thursday, like that's not a good option for you right now. Now, what is good though, is a lot of times these events that you may be looking for or looking at are annual events, or they happen on some type of regular basis. So maybe once a year or twice a year, a couple times a year, maybe quarterly. So maybe you can't speak at next week's, but they're probably going to do this event again next year. And so waiting a few weeks after this year's event and then reaching out to them, hey, I was just curious when you'll start reviewing speakers for next year's event, and then having a system in place. I think this is where, again, a lot of speakers drop the ball. Is, let's say you start reaching out to a couple different people and you make some good contacts and they say, yeah, we'll start reviewing speakers in 4 months. And so we just assume like, okay, well, in 4 months, if you still need a speaker, I hope you reach out to me. Well, they're going to forget about you by then. But if you say, hey, is it okay if I reach out to you in 4 months? And they say, of course, because they don't think you're going to actually do it, because no speakers actually do. But then having like a CRM or some type of system in place that you set it and forget it, a reminder that, okay, 4 months from now, I need to follow up with this group, follow up with this organization. Hey, we talked back in the spring. You said you were going to be reviewing speakers right now. I just wanted to follow up and see if that was still the case, and would love to have a conversation with you about your event, right? You do that multiplied by multiple events and different organizations and groups out of the course of a year, and you start to build some traction. You also, over time, there's a speaker friend who told me one time that speaking leads to speaking. Speaking leads to speaking. The more you speak, the more you speak. Meaning, when you speak, what it tends to happen is you start to have people in the audience who may be interested in hiring you to speak. You will start to have some repeat business, some referral business, some the event planner may recommend you to someone else. And so it starts to become, speaking is very much a momentum business, right? And so initially you're trying to like push the boulder just to get some momentum going. But once you get the momentum going, it's a lot easier, but you can't take your foot off the gas. It gets a little bit easier there. So again, the point being is, like we talked about earlier, you can't just build a website and a demo video and just hope that people are going to magically find you, because it doesn't work like that. But you have to be proactive and not just wait for someone to reach out and email you, but for you to go find the types of events that you want to be speaking at and proactively start conversations with them.
Yeah. That totally makes sense to be proactive, because how will people find you if if you don't reach out to them? So a topic that I'm sure that you talk about all the time is, how do you structure your speaking fees? Do you have different packages that you offer? And if so, what do those packages look like?
Yep. Great question. And so whenever it comes to how much should I charge, the answer is, it depends, which is a horrible answer. All right. So let me give you a couple of variables and factors that go into it. And then I'm going to give you a free tool, that's kind of a shortcut. So one of the factors is going to be your industry. You can charge more in some industries versus others. You can charge more speaking to corporations than you could speaking to nonprofits. You can typically charge more speaking to colleges and universities versus elementary schools. It's not that one organization or group or industry is better than the other. It's just every industry is going to have slightly different kind of like fee ranges that they are used to. Another variable and factor is going to be your website and your demo video, your marketing assets that we talked about. And so whether we like it or not, people judge books by their cover. And so a lot of times when an event or organization is looking for a speaker, the thing that they're going to do is they're going to pull up a couple of different speaker websites. They're going to pull up a couple different demo videos. And so you want to make sure that your stuff is on par and as sharp as anybody else that is in your space that is a similar fee range that you might be compared to. So again, that doesn't mean that you have to have spent tens of thousands of dollars to get a sharp website or demo video. So in fact, in one of our programs, we actually make websites and demo videos for our students. So it's like we just remove that barrier for you. We will make those. We'll make them look good. We'll make them look sharp, but that way you don't have to think about it. Because it is important that you're like you put your best foot forward, that you make a good first impression with potential event planners. So that's going to be a factor. Another factor is going to be your experience, meaning if you're a brand new speaker just getting started, you're probably not going to be able to charge as much as someone who's been doing this for 5, 10, 20 years. Is probably, frankly, just a better speaker than you. And so that's going to be a factor. So again, a lot of variables and factors that go into it. So we put together a shortcut tool people can find at myspeakerfee.com, And basically what it is, it's a free speaking fee calculator. And so if you go through, it's like 10 multiple choice questions, answer a bunch of questions, it will spit out a number at the bottom of what you should be charging. Now, speaking fees is much more of an art than a science, but at least get you in the ballpark when you're just like, I have no stinking clue of what I should be charging. That'll at least get you going and get you pointed in the right direction. So again, myspeakerfee.com. I'd encourage people to check it out.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. I actually checked it out and it was very informative.
Oh, cool. That's awesome. Again, it just gives you a starting place, you know? Yeah. So like when you're just like, I don't have any earthly idea.
Exactly.
That'll at least get you in the ballpark there, and it gives you something to go off of.
That's perfect. Is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience today that we haven't talked about yet?
Yeah, I think, again, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but I think anybody can do this, but it does require work and effort. And so we tell speakers all the time, this is simple, but it's not easy. It is simple, but it's not easy. It's kind of like if you wanted to lose weight, what do you need to do? I'm no health expert. I'm no dietitian. I'm no exercise, whatever. But I know you got to do two things. You got to pay attention to what you eat and you got to exercise. And that's it, right? And so it's simple. It's like, oh yeah, we'll just do those two things. But it's not necessarily easy. Otherwise, we'd all be thin and beautiful and whatever. But it does require work. It does require effort. It does require discipline. And so you have to, I had a friend tell me one time, like, you have to fall in love with the process, right? And so being a speaker, we like the idea of being on stage. We like the accolades of that, like giving a presentation, of people wanting to shake our hands or take pictures with us or ask for our autographs or traveling around the world. And all of that is glamorous and sexy and nice. And like, that is part of the gig, but there's also a part of just like the grind of reaching out to clients and following up to people and like the sales and marketing of it. So it's not always just like sexy all the time. Like you got to do the work in the same way that, if you want to be in shape and you want to be healthy, like you have to do the work when no one's looking. Like I wasn't excited to get up this morning and go do a workout. I'm not excited about like when I got to eat kale rather than chocolate, but I know like, okay, if I want the result, then I got to fall in love with the process that's going to allow me to get to the result. So again, be ready to do the work, but if you do the work, you will see the results that you're looking for.
Thank you so much. That's great. I mean, this applies to every area in your life. So
totally.
Yeah. Last but not least, what is the best way for our listeners to find you online if they want to connect or work with you?
Yeah. My guess is if you're listening to this podcast, you probably listen to other podcasts. So if you are interested in the speaking topic, we have a podcast called the Speaker Lab Podcast. The Speaker Lab Podcast. We got at this point about 400 episodes, hundreds and hundreds of hours in content. We got a lot of material there on all things related to speaking and websites and fees and a lot of stuff that we've covered and talked about today. So there's no shortage of opportunities for you to dig in over there. We mentioned the book, The Successful Speaker, 5 Steps for Booking Gigs, Getting Paid, and building your platform. And so it takes that speak framework and digs into that deeper. So you can find that on Amazon or wherever books are sold. And everything we do is over at thespeakerlab.com, thespeakerlab.com. If you're interested in working with us, working with any of our programs to help you build and grow your speaking business, then feel free to reach out and we're happy to help however we can.
Wonderful. Again, Gran, thank you so much for taking the time to walk us through becoming a successful paid speaker today. I really appreciate it, and I enjoyed learning more about paid speaking, the thing I never thought I would ever consider doing. So thank you so much for that.
That's awesome. You bet. Thanks for the time, Claudia.
Take care and talk to you soon. Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Wired for Success podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you did, please take a sec to rate and review my show or share it with a friend. That way you can support the show and help me reach and support other entrepreneurs like yourself as well. If you would like my help to figure out how you can go from overwhelmed and overworked hustler to empowered and confident leader, check out my website at www.wiredforsuccess.solutions and book a free 20-minute strategy session with me. Can't wait to help you get wired for success. Until next time, take care. Bye.